Chapter 84. The Downfall of Falmas Kingdom. On that day, the world fell into fear once again. The revival of Storm Dragon Veldora was complete. This information was speedily passed on to the countries under the influence of the Western Saints Church. The kings of each country, once again tried to rack their brains for countermeasures against Storm Dragon Veldora. Though, there was a country that had a more pressing issue. Falmas Kingdom, inside the audience room of the royal castle. On a certain morning, unexpectedly in the middle of the throne, something was left on it. That thing was a lump of flesh. On that lump of flesh, a face was inserted on the center. It was that of the king's. He's still alive. Although he had a dead gaze, he seems to still retain some small indication of his consciousness. The soldier who went to guard in the morning noticed a groaning sound. That's when he found him. Although the soldiers that served in the royal palace were elite imperial guards, they can't stop letting out scream in fear after seeing the body. Such horrible appearance, it's inevitable if they did not realize that the thing they found was the king they served. However, the cabinet minister who rushed after hearing the soldiers scream recognized that it was their king, which had complete change in his appearance. There must be a bottle under me. Please let me drink it. Understanding the words of the king, who repeat the words in a weak and rambling whispering. They lift the king's body cautiously. The bodily fluids remain indistinct, covering the vicinity. There are people who vomit in fear. There are some who stumbled on their own feet. It was a pile of decaying limbs that were attached to something that resembled a human body. The sight alone would awaken a person basic instinctive fear, a truly disgusting object. Though their faces' expressions stiffened, they endured it with their willpower to continue their duty. Gathering the remaining magicians in the royal palace, they had finished confirming that the lump of flesh was certainly the king himself. Even with such an appearance, they still need to pay their respect towards the king. Having lifted the king's body according to his words, there was a bottle just like what he said. But, will he be okay if he drink this? From that uncertainty, the magicians decided to evaluate it. They found out that it was a complete recovery medicine, full potion. It was a legendary class healing medicine just a little below resurrection medicine, elixir. It has been said that by drinking this, it will fully restore the lost body parts. The manufacturing method was lost, even the dwarf race cannot copy it, so it was called as a miracle drug. A thought crossed in the magician's mind to use the medicine for their research, but they wouldn't dare let such words escape their mouths in the presence of the king. Of course, they knew that the only way to cure the king's current situation was by using the medicine. The change was extreme. At the same time as he drank the medicine, the king's body was transformed into its former healthy appearance. The nearest minister quickly came with suitable clothing. Wearing the clothes and taking a breather, the king ordered to conduct an emergency imperial conference. The palace became busy, arranging for the conference. The king looked at his trusted ministers that remained behind and said, "Let's change the location, I will speak about what had happened. Before the conference begin, I want to hear your opinions." "So," he said weakly. After listening to the king's story, the ministers became silent. It was unbelievable and too much for them at that time. "We will ask once more. Did everyone really die? If it wasn't a complete defeat, and if the survivors are not routed, then they are really dead? Isn't the supply corps positioned at the back? Are they safe?" The king shook his head weakly. Such an appearance made everyone understand whether they accept this or not. Everyone in the expedition was dead. One of the ministers broke down in tears after hearing the confirmation. The minister who asked about the safety of the supply corps had sent off his own son for his first involvement in a war. He made some arrangements earlier to make sure his son would not be stationed at the front where it was dangerous but at the back. But all of it was useless. In the first place, everyone thought that they would be triumphant in this war, so he was sent to participate in his first campaign. The feeling of forthcoming victory he held at that time? The king could no longer remember it. However, on such catastrophe only one had survived from the huge number of participants. The total fatalities enumerated to around 15,000 people. This was a huge loss, the likes no one had ever seen before. "King, was it true? Was the opponent only one monster? A relatively calm minister asked the king. The king nods at that question. It was true. And the only one who survived was me. Again, he narrated the facts that were hard to accept. Of the torture he had, of the monster's situation. And also on the fact of the birth of new demon lord. And the terrible future that awaited the Falmouth kingdom, for opposing the demon lord. The ministers turned silent. According to the king's story, the fall of Falmouth kingdom was a certainty that it would occur imminently. That's why the imperial conference was conducted, and it would be held in 3 days after every noble had assembled. And then, the king told everyone about the 3 choices suggested by the demon lord. Now then, my proposal. King of Falmouth kingdom. You can only take one of the 3 options I present before you. The first option is for you to resign. You must step down from your position to take the full responsibility for this war. Naturally, after the war, you must pay damages. That can be in the form of parts of Falmouth's territory or 1,500 star gold coins. The next one is the second option. You as the king must submit your country to our country, Tempest. In this case, your Falmouth kingdom will be converted as a vassal state of Tempest. The opposition from the nobles will definitely be big, so it can be expected that it will be hard to convince them. Your treatment, as a vassal state, will be dependent upon the decisions made at the conference. Although it is close to an absolute surrender, the lives and property of the citizens will be guaranteed by me. And the third option, I don't really recommend this. You once again gather the nobles, and continue the war against our country. If you take this choice, at that time your life will really come to an end. Although you might be liberated from the misery of this world, you can protect your pride to the end. The citizens would starve, and the war will continue for a long time. You're free to choose. Make sure you tell the messenger in a week. Think about your answer wisely. With a lovely smile on its beautiful girly face, she indicated it while smiling kindly. A truly terrifying demon lord. Just by reciting the words, his entire being filled with fear. To oppose such a person, he never dared to even think about it again. His fear overshadowed his pride as a king. He no longer held any desire to oppose that person. Turning him into a lump of flesh, every day he was made to eat his own limbs. He totally never wanted to taste such fear ever again, but he needed to listen to the minister's words. Unbelievable. A single star gold coins is equivalent to 100 gold coins. Do you mean we need to pay 150,000 gold coins? There are no reasons to pay monsters such amount of money. I will never approve this. That's right. Moreover, the territory too. Even if it's only a territory of account, I won't agree it either. To become a neighbor to monster territory. Also, something like submitting is also difficult. There is no guarantee that the opponent will stick to the agreement to not interfere with the citizens. We are determined, we will resist to the unpleasant end. We swear by all our pride, we will eliminate those monsters. For King Edomales, he already knew that the flow of the conversation would become like this. The nobles in this place had yet to see reality. It's not because they didn't have fear, but because they are not the ones who went to war. From a safe place, they sent people to fight in their stead. There is no need to think about the consequence when defeat came either. It was good until now. Falmouth kingdom was a major power. It was above the neighboring countries. But this time it will be impossible. After all, the opponent is a demon lord who defeated an army single-handedly. Is that okay? The opponent is a demon lord. This is not a metaphor or exaggeration, but a demon lord that can match against an army and overwhelm them by herself. You can call it pride, but are you guys the ones who went to war? My pride has already broken and is already gone. Like hell I want to taste such fear again. I won't permit such foolishness. If you still want to go to war, you bastards can go to war, I won't stop it. In the case that we can't trust the monsters, so what? To submit? Or to go to war? Is it a good idea? I will not go to war. It's already too late, we can only surrender. This is enough, this is already reasonable. The demon lord had already declared. If you say it was for the sake of the country, I think it's stupid to not consider the state of affair in the enemy country. If you change the state of relationship with them, perhaps they can become a good neighbor. Like that. I was informed by the monster. If I listened to what Marquis Muller and Count Herman had said, this situation would never have occurred. It was my own desire, not for the sake of the citizens, but for myself. There is no second chance. There is none. If I make a mistake in choosing the option, not only me but catastrophe will pour down on the citizens. My honor, my pride, I don't care about them anymore. At least, please think of a plan where no calamity will befall on the citizens. Hearing the king screaming with all of his spirit, the ministers were frozen. That devious king that put his own profit as the maximum priority had personally admitted his mistake. And he ended up answering that it was hopeless after seeing the difference in war potential. Certainly, just like what the king had said, the possibility for them to win was impossible. Their prides were just an excuse, they just wanted to protect their own interests, and they were embarrassed about it. The king kneeled before his ministers. I am extremely sorry. Please find the best solution. For the country. For the people. King Edomales also gave a slight nod, and their discussion continued once again. Before the nobles assembled, they needed to think up some plans. Urging the nobles was an absolute obligation, and if it was not done, this country would certainly perish. What should be done to make the situation improved? What should be done for the happiness of the citizens? The discussion between the king and the ministers continued without end. 3 days passed. The nobles has gathered and the imperial conference was held. Different from the previous one, there were no composure in the king and ministers' expressions, only seriousness. The nobles felt the difference in the atmosphere and pressure was showing on their faces. The nobles were informed about the king's story. Hearing that speech, the nobles were thrown into commotion. This country was conquered by the monster's country Tempest. Therefore, to take the responsibility, I will resign from the throne. Due to the explosive declarations that were spoken by the king, the conference became complicated. The disastrous fate of the defeated army was announced by the minister. The unbelievable content was the only survivor was the king alone. The disapprovals were flooding against the king's decision to fulfill the demand of compensation. Such talks was justified. As Falmas Kingdom was a large country with total population of 30 million, the taxes revenue that the national treasury received each year was about 5 million gold coins. That was also the taxes revenue of last year. However, the demanded compensation was 1,500 star gold coins, or 150,000 gold coins, or proportional to 3% of yearly tax revenue. Furthermore, in regards to surrendering territories, the nobles were violent and speak loudly for the king to take responsibility. They demand the royal family to pay the indemnities, also they firmly refuse to surrender the territories. The nobles' objections were not completely unjustified. However, the nobles had forgotten. The opponent was a demon lord who can crush an army by herself. Or rather, perhaps they did not want to believe it. When that matter was pointed out, there are some who turned pale, but there are some who act rudely too. Just like what King Edomales had been troubled, the nobles didn't reach any conclusion and the conference was in utter chaos. King, even if you resigned, you cannot escape from taking responsibility. In the first place, did you think you can escape only by yourself? If this one did not resign, then I will receive that demon lord's anger. Is that fine with you? Furthermore, if this one don't resign and keep governing, there is no other choice than to become a vassal state. Are you prepared for that? However, to completely surrender to that monster is... He kept repeating such exchange many times. The ministers look at this situation and recalled their previous conversation with the king. Their face become red from anger. King Edomales certainly can be considered a greedy person, but not to such extent into greediness. Moreover, he is not a stupid king and his eyes see what lies ahead. Even the mistake this time was surely also originated from his aspiration to protect his country's interest. To push all the blame onto the king was a mistake. That was not something that can be accepted. The nobles as always were just wanted to protect their own interest, and as for the sake of Falmas kingdom itself, it was clear that they never cared for the lives and properties of the citizens. In the end, the conference ended without reaching any settlement. It was going just like the expectation of Rimuru. Civil war erupted in Falmas kingdom between the king's faction and the nobles' faction. The result was the downfall of Falmas kingdom. Henceforth, it was passed down on the later generation as a country that was shattered because of the demon lord's wrath. It's said that at the time there came a single youth from the domain of Count Nidal. This man would be known as a new hero. As he went, he gathered volunteers to protect the citizens' properties and fought against the greed of the noble class. Those who were quick of wit, as well as those who were cautious, chose to join the side of this youth early on in his quest. The name of this youth was Yumu. Yumu was the commander of the frontier garrison, and as such, quickly gained reputation with villages and peasants alike, especially in the outlying villages that were under threat from monster raids. The man himself was very charming, and in the blink of an eye, his power and influence had expanded greatly. From the words of those villages were the words that would describe him: the invincible, undefeated, and always victorious. These led to rumors about this man. The disunited noble armies were too few and too scattered to oppose him, and as he went on, he began to show his overwhelming supremacy. Not only was this young man, Yumu, backed by Marquis Muller, Count Herman and other such influential noblemen, but he also receives the very backing of the royal family's heir. The son of the former King Edalmales, Edgar, was still a boy, yet he played an active role as Yumu's personal staff officer. His father King Edalmales, however, was executed at the time of his resignation. The story of the former king's execution had become popular ghost talk as of late. At the time the guillotine blade fell upon him, a young girl's laugh could be heard echoing at the scene. Then, as if by strange force, the head and body began to float in midair and vanished into the far horizon. Certainly it could not be a mass illusion. The proof for this was the pool of blood that was left behind after the corpse vanished out of sight. Though this part of the story would be made to disappear from the chronicles of history, to fade into the depths of the void. Although in the ages to come such a subject would come to argument and theory, there was evidence that claimed Marius, the hero King Yumu's right-hand man, possessed a spitting image of the former King Edalmales. Though by that point, there was no nobleman that could judge the legitimacy of such a claim. In just 2 years, the young hero King Yumu the Great had accomplished his noble quest, and succeeded in uniting the scattered territories of the former Falmas kingdom. This was only made possible through the noble efforts of the Dwarf and Burman kingdoms. This sole factor would be known as the greatest peace that led to the successful unification. However, even beyond this was a peace that shocked the country. That was the non-aggression agreement that was bestowed upon the noble hero King Yumu by the great demon lord, Rimuru Tempest, a member of the mighty 8-star demon lords. In the end, this treaty was used as a pretext of securing post-war investments and indemnity in support of Yumu. The signing of the non-aggression pact between the great demon lord, Rimuru Tempest, and the hero King Yumu indicated the end of a war that brought terror to the peoples of the kingdom. The fear of a demon lord's wrath and terror, capable of causing an entire army to disappear without a fight. While it isn't spoken, this pact also served to institute the legitimacy of the young hero king. With the former king dead and the hero king taking the throne with justice as his witness, a friendship was said to have been born between the hero King Yumu and the great demon lord, Rimuru Tempest. With the support of these mighty countries, a new country was born. This country's name would come to be known as Falmouth. The meaning of the name was a country born through the greatest peril. Yumu formally assumed the position as the founding king, changing his name from Yumu to Falmouth. By his side were 2 mighty devils, as well as his trusted staff officer and wise political advisor. Though the latter's history is faded into insignificance, the hero king had surrounded himself with skilled and wise individuals of unquestionable loyalty and grace. With the trust of his acquaintances as his guide, Yumu thus set out on his road as a hero king of the country of Falmouth. The new era. Against such turbulent era, the progress of history does not stop.